Tomorrow marks the 15th anniversary of World Contraception Day. The day aims to improve awareness of contraception and to enable young people especially to make informed choices on their sexual and reproductive health. Well, for more on this, we're joined now by the cluster manager at Seoul City Institute for Social Justice, Palesa Mokooane, who joins us virtually. Palesa, thank you so much for your time this evening. I want to start by just talking about the wording that we use around our sexual and reproductive lives. I feel quite positive about the fact that in the media, for instance, we speak about encouraging sexual and reproductive health. And it's not something that we're trying to, especially with young people, trying to hit them over the head with this information. We're trying to put a narrative out there that this is something for their health and for their well-being and for a better life for all of them, including their family. How important is the language that we use around our sexual and reproductive lives?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. The importance of language and even just how we say things is quite important because, as you mentioned, this is sexual and reproductive health and rights, meaning this country sees it as a very important and integral part of young people's lives. That's why it's in the Constitution, that it is your right. So it's important that even the wording, though, it's very deliberate so that we actually encourage and we build around getting, just getting used to talking about such contraceptions or just like putting the words out there as they are.
In your opinion, do you believe that we have made positive strides in the right direction, especially with young men and women, knowing that it's their right to have access to accessible contraceptive and indeed affordable contraceptive? Where do we stand right now in that regard?
We've made progress, but there's still a lot that also needs to be done, with an acknowledgement that COVID really wreaked havoc. So access is still obviously a big challenge because not all options are available in all clinics, or at least are all available in all hospitals thereof. So we are in, I think, in good progress because there's still a huge uptake. The only obviously issue that we have, as you've just seen more recently, is some areas just experiencing a lot of stockouts, but we are there. The information is there and the options are there.
Speaking of stockouts,
So,
I managed just to see an article, the latest information released by the Stop Stockouts Project, which speaks about, which at the end of August spoke about the active pharmaceutical ingredient shortages that led to production delays and quality control issues. And one of the big pieces of medication that was impacted was contraceptives. How big of a problem is this? And have we paid enough attention to the fact that contraceptives are just not available in our clinics and our hospitals?
I can't really answer to that specifics in terms of obviously the stockouts and then obviously the quantities that we have. But what I can highlight is that there are different options. So if perhaps injectables are quite popular, because I think it's about 25% of injectables are quite popular amongst young people. So there are other options that young people can actually access in hospitals or in clinics. The National Department of Health has actually initiated a beautiful initiative that focuses on young people, so that is a space where they can actually go learn about the different options. They are very free and very healthy. So those are some of the options that are there. So one would have to go and visit their nearest clinic to understand what is available and perhaps what is ideal in terms of using it. We might be short of female or male condoms. It is another option because we also encourage dual protection, which means even when you perhaps are on an injectable, it's important for one to then obviously use a condom during sex.
We spoke earlier about more and more young people knowing what their rights are with regards to access to contraception, but we have also had many conversations about, even though our Constitution enshrines these rights, for instance, parts of our important but vulnerable parts of our community, like members of the LGBTQI plus community, face not the best, if I can call it, bedside manner in many of our health institutions where they go to receive medical care. Have we made inroads in terms of educating our health workers about knowing that that is not a space for their personal opinion, but it is a space for them to carry out what's enshrined in our Constitution? And when a young man or woman comes in and says, I would like access to contraception, it is their duty to give them the right information and to give them that access to contraception.
Organizations like Soul City deal with such in assisting the department in making sure that obviously we work with healthcare workers in making sure that the social aspect of things are done. So Soul City would be an expert in saying, how do you approach young people? What kind of language, as you asked earlier, should we then use in a way that it actually accommodates and we don't find ourselves discriminating at all? So it's those kind of steps that youth-friendly services that are being offered in clinics are trying to address. It's important that we don't leave anyone behind in trying to actually just fix the problem, because it's important for us to acknowledge that, yes, healthcare workers know the clinical part of things, but the social element of it, of how do you then make one person welcome? How do you make a clinic a safe space that is non-binary, that does not look at your sexuality, that really doesn't look even at your color or your gender? Because it's important to obviously engage even young men, because the responsibility as much as falls with the female when they fall pregnant in terms of their sexual and reproductive health and right. But if it's between two people that have engaged in actually trying to maybe conceive. So those are some of the discussions that still need to happen, because the responsibility then thereof, if then they decide to actually have a baby, is that they would need to raise a child. There's also a financial aspect of it, an economical aspect of it. Are two people ready? And if they are ready, how are they going to deal with it? There are post-pregnancy stresses and other, mental health issues that are actually part of that. So it's a very multifaceted issue that needs to be addressed. So it's not just we're looking at this, but in terms of whether a young person decides, I am going to then use this kind of contraception because then it fits well with me, or it's my choice, that they're allowed, because it's their constitutional right.
Now, Palesa, before I let you go, we might have families sitting in their lounge now on a Sunday night watching this conversation, and it might be the parents' perfect excuse to start a conversation that perhaps they've been avoiding and that perhaps they think would be too awkward, which I think often with teenagers these days, it's probably not awkward for them, it's more awkward for the adult involved. Could you give us some suggestions on how they could approach the subject, other than just saying, that was an interesting interview we just watched on eNCA. How do you guys feel as a 16-year-old in the house about contraception, and do you feel like you have access to it?
Communication is key. So we don't just start when now perhaps your daughter has started menstruating and we have these scare tactics. Even when you have a son, it's about also looking at how we actually break down either patriarchal systems in terms of saying, how do we all have a conversation about what is happening? Body changes are bound to happen. So it should not just also be a matter of, what are they teaching you at school? What are you, because also there's the internet, but it's more like, how do we have conversations about real life issues? So if we're talking sexuality, if we're talking different kinds of contraceptions because they are there. And perhaps this is, young people, because like for instance, these youth-friendly services, they offer options, and they could go get a brochure, bring it back home, have a discussion with the parents around just what is out there, and perhaps what the parents could advise. I always say that the best way would be, this is a school project, but parents out there, do you know that a school project really affects our kids? It affects our sisters, it affects our brothers. So it's important to actually have these conversations, because there are real life experiences or real life issues that our siblings are going to experience. So it's important that they don't get incorrect information out there, because they will get the information. But how do we then find ourselves to be very comfortable? I know a lot of people are saying, easier said than done, but it's important for us to try. Like tomorrow, we are saying it's contraceptive day. So how do we then not make it just a day, but it's actually an ongoing conversation about the different options, and also just encouraging, because once we have these discussions, it makes it, one becomes very comfortable in that they don't access backstreet abortions, which are very, very bad, and they are very dangerous. So in the case that you go access backstreet abortions, we don't know what options have been used or what kind of medication has been administered. It's important for young people to know that these services are free, and obviously if there are any reactions to whatever that has been administered to one, they can go back, because there's records that are kept. So then there is some kind of medical treatment that one can then get. But imagine now that you've just accessed backstreet abortions, nobody knows exactly what they've used. And are you allergic? Is there something wrong? You don't even know the pills themselves. So it's important to then say, we need to make sure that people access the right contraceptions at the right places, which is at a health facility.
And that is the perfect place to leave our conversation. Thank you so much for your insights and for being so encouraging in encouraging these kinds of warm and open conversations in our household. I think it was much needed. That's Palesa Mokooane from the Soul City Institute for Social Justice.